Hi, and welcome back to Bean Talk. Today we're going to talk about grinders, specifically espresso grinders for your home and what to watch out for if you're buying your first espresso grinder. Before we get going, if you're new to our channel, our name is Bean Talk Coffee News and we're talking about all things coffee. So this can be either tutorials, reviews of coffee related products, but also interviews. We like to talk to people from the industry. So if you're interested in coffee, give us a follow and a like, it would mean a lot. So we have two different grinders now here with us. We have for one as an on-demand grinder, we have the FAEMA Touch&Match grinder. As a single dose grinder, we have Eureka Mignon Single Dose. So chances are you just got your first espresso machine for home or you're looking to buy one. So I want to briefly talk about what differences there are in grinders, what to watch out for, and also what you might want or not want for your grinder. All right, let's start talking about the burrs first. We have two different kinds of burrs basically. There are flat burrs and there are conical burrs. What do the burrs do? So either case, you're gonna have two pieces that belong together, either the flat burrs or this conical one. The flat obviously being just flat like this and the conical being like this. And so you're gonna have one part and the other one sitting on top. And then you're gonna have a gap in between, which is gonna change the size of the particles, grind size basically. So this obviously is gonna turn due to a motor, then you're getting your ground coffee. There are a lot of opinions out there whether flat burrs or conical burrs are better. Both of them have advantages and disadvantages. A lot of modern grinders use flat burrs now, but there are also a couple of ones with conical burrs, and to be honest, it's all gonna come down to the specific grinder. You can't really say that one's better or this one's better, depend on the coffee and maybe personal preferences. And if we're talking about espresso grinders, most people are probably gonna know grinders like this one, which is an on-demand grinder, meaning that you can set a dose for a coffee, so that if you put in the portafilter and start grinding, it's gonna stop at some point. You can set this dose and you can change it, of course. So specifically for this grinder, of course, you have one option for a double espresso, and if you care, there's also one for the single espresso. Most people probably not gonna use that one, but you could change it anyway. And then, of course, change how much coffee is coming out. So the second kind that are getting more and more popular nowadays are single dose grinders. Single dosing means you weigh in a certain amount of coffee that you want to grind, put it in, and then should be roughly the same amount that gets out of the grinder. Of course, even those are not perfect, there's not really a thing like zero retention. There's always going to be a little bit stuck in the grinder somewhere. At least I haven't had the chance to work with a really zero retention grinder. There's always going to be a little bit in there. But the big advantage of these are that in case you have like the top shelf kind of coffee that you don't want to share with your whole family, you can just prepare one coffee at a time basically, and then it's empty and you can hide the coffee again somewhere. Of course, if you're looking to make a lot of coffee, you don't change the coffee so much or always drink one bag at a time, then I would probably stick to an on-demand grinder. The advantage being you put the coffee in, you have a large hopper where you can actually store it, you set your dose and grind coffee after coffee. If you look around coffee forums or look at other YouTube videos, there's a lot of vocabulary that people talk about, saying this is important, this is important. One of these things, of course, I already mentioned is zero retention, that people talk about how much retention is there. I get it, if you have a grinder for your home espresso machine specifically, you probably don't want to use a lot of coffee or you don't go through a kilo of coffee per day. At least I don't at home. And so I understand that you want to keep the retention as low as possible. That's what retention is. Retention is basically how much coffee is stuck in between your burrs that you can't really get out properly. Then also a lot of people talk about RPM, how many RPMs does your grinder have. Of course, if you're talking about a professional environment, a cafe or a restaurant where you serve a lot of coffee, shot after shot, you want your grinder to be super fast. With home coffee grinders, I don't think you're gonna need this high RPM range or like huge bursts that can grind through a lot of coffee in a little time. I think you're probably gonna be fine with a grinder like this one, or this one of course. Of course, if you do grind a lot of coffee, there's gonna be friction in the burrs and they're gonna heat up if you do grind a lot of coffee. Again, in a professional environment, if you're pulling a lot of shots, if you're grinding like kilo after kilo, then of course it's gonna get warmer and this is gonna mess with the density of your coffee beans and therefore change the results of the espresso shots you pull. But again, for at home, we'll probably have a couple of minutes in between grinding those espresso shots. It's not gonna make that much of a difference. So at the end of the day, there are a lot of options out there between different grinders. I wouldn't go too much into detail. I would just try to look at them, work with them, how we like to handle them, the grinders, and of course how the coffee tastes. Nonetheless, I would suggest that if you really go out and spend a lot of money on home espresso machine like the Faemina for example, I wouldn't start saving money on the grinder. So if you already pay like thousands of euros for the espresso machine, I wouldn't go out and buy a €100 grinder. Even a hand grinder. The Commandant is a super grinder for filter coffee, but it's gonna take you a long time to grind an espresso. That's it for today. Next week, we're gonna talk about this grinder specifically and go into depth about the pros and cons of this grinder, why you might wanna buy it. Until then, drink loads of good coffee and see you then. Bye.